Hello and welcome back. We're now at module 2, and in this module we're going to discuss the shadow parts of the self, and it's very likely, very possible and very likely perhaps, that you haven't heard of the shadow before, and I'm going to explain that to you and what it means and what these different parts of ourselves, the roles that they have within our life. And we actually all have many parts within ourselves, and this is nothing to do with personality disorder or anything like that. This is perfectly normal, and it's just a way of explaining all the different types of behaviours and all the different types of shadows that we all have. And so I'm just going to get the PowerPoint presentation up for you. See if I can do that again. And let's see. Okay, there we go. So module 2 is, and I've called it the fragmented self. So as I said, we're going to be talking about the shadow. We're going to be talking about the shadow and what it is. We're going to cover your core wounds. We're going to cover how your wounds are formed, the many different parts of the self, and how we go from thinking to doing to being. And so what's the shadow? Well, in this module, we're going to take a deep dive into the fragmented parts of your soul. And we're going to say hello to your fears. So what on earth is the shadow? What does that mean? I can hear you asking. Well, as I said, we all have many selves that make up our personality, also known as our shadow. And I think it was Carl Jung that coined the phrase, the shadow. And quite simply, the shadow is the parts of the self that we don't like, that we've disowned, that we've chosen to ignore because we're either afraid or ashamed of them. We think that other people wouldn't like us if they knew who we really are. So we disown those parts and we try to hide them from the world. But hidden deep beneath our personality are layers of repressed energy, which can and do inhibit our development by forcing us to avoid individual experiences. And our shadow parts can even cause damaging addictions. And this trapped energy, as I mentioned, is known as the shadow. And what we do is we wear a mask, an invisible mask, so that people can't see us. We shield parts of our true nature from the world. What we don't know is that those parts are visible to everyone else apart from us. Other people can see the things that we're trying to hide, but we can't. So really, we hide nothing, because our shadow parts come out in moments of anger or when we're triggered. And in those moments, it's usually our shadow that reacts the quickest. So if this is a completely new concept to you, which it may well be, let's just suspend any denial that you may have for a moment, or that these elements of the self exist. Just put that aside for now and have an honest conversation with yourself. Many aspects of the self are unacceptable to the ego mind. And I know you've all heard of the ego, which is why they're in the shadow. It's like we lock these parts away in the cellar and forget about them, or try to. We all have a doubter, a critic. We all certainly have a critic. Many of us have a control freak. Lots more of us have a pleaser. If you've been a people pleaser all your life, which many of my clients have been, you'll resonate with that one. We all certainly have a victim. We all have a hero, because we can all do heroic things at times as well. And we all have a vulnerable child that's still in there, and many other sub-personalities as well. We have many different selves, which are archetypal characters that make up our whole being. The me, the person that we know as the me. And according to the Sufis, and Sufism is described as the mystical arm of Islam, we all have a negative and a positive ego. The positive ego is our self-respect, our integrity, our honesty. And the negative ego distorts our perceptions and causes us to see the world from the perspective of that particular part of the shadow. And that particular part, or any particular part of the shadow, can take charge at any given time. And the psychologist Carl Jung told us that all our parts have value. And at certain times in our lives, they've served us in some way. These parts have helped us to function in the world at a young age. They very likely have saved us. But as we get older, those parts can have a detrimental effect on us as an adult. Unfortunately, they don't have a sell-by date. But as I said, these different parts of the self are not to be confused in any way with multiple personality disorder, which is a mental illness and entirely different from what we're talking about here. These other selves are perfectly natural and everybody has them. But to be completely whole, we must have body, mind, and spirit all working together. And all too often, most people ignore the other aspects of the self and just concentrate on the physical being. But as I'm sure, I hope that you know, we're so much more than that. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And this model of consciousness that I'm going to explain to you was devised by Carl Jung. And I discovered it some years ago from one of my mentors, and it's stayed with me ever since, because I think it describes the human journey perfectly. When we're born as essence. We come into the world whole and complete. And at a very early age, we're wounded. But this wound is actually meant to happen. It's part of the process that separates us from our mother. But what happens in response to the wound? And the wound can be something really simple, like you were ignored when you started to cry when you were a baby. And what happens then is a protector part is formed, and it comes in to protect us, to keep us safe. And this protector part then forms our personality. And as we grow older, we think this is who we are. But as I said, we're so much more than that. We have all the other aspects of ourselves that we haven't tapped into. And the wounded part then retreats into the shadow and forms the other selves of our personality. The parts that we've disowned because we're ashamed of them, or we feel guilty and feel that these parts wouldn't be accepted. But as I said before, we can't hide them no matter how hard we try. Those parts show up instantly when we go into the fight or flight mode, when something happens to make us angry, fearful, or jealous. Whatever incident you're responding to, as soon as we're triggered, the shadow takes charge. And we go through so much of our life unaware of this until we get to a point in life where we say, hang on a minute, why do I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? And then, if you're like me, you start to question everything in your life. And it's around this time that we start searching for answers. And so begins the spiritual journey back to wholeness, back to the essence of who we are, which I believe is our soul's journey. And this journey usually happens around midlife, excuse me, which is a state of mind and not a number. And it's at this time in our life when we start asking deeper questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? What am I meant to be doing with my life? Those types of things. And when we do begin to ask these kind of questions and start searching for answers, we start on a path back to the person that we really are at the core of our being. And on this trip, we travel back through the wound when we begin to understand it and start to figure out the patterns of behaviour. Most often, I have to say, with the help of a coach or mentor, as it's really, really difficult to figure all this out on your own. But we can start to see our wounds not as something to hide away in the darkness, not something that we need to be ashamed of, but something to welcome into the light as part of us that's useful and has served us in earlier years. I find it incredible that some people don't even ask themselves these sorts of questions, as I've always pondered on this kind of stuff for as long as I can remember. I don't know about you, but I've always wanted to know why I'm here and what I'm supposed to be doing. And thank goodness, I've now found it. But I guess if you're here on this boot camp, you've already been considering these kinds of questions. Or if you haven't, I'm sure you will be very soon after going through this course. Because whether you know it or not, you're a truth seeker. And you want to understand and get some clarity on yourself, first and foremost. But you also want to know what this thing called life is all about. And above all, which I think is the most important question there is what is the meaning of our life, of your life? Don't you want to know that your life matters? Don't we all deep down want to know that we've made a difference and that the world's a better place for us being here? I know that I do. That is of paramount importance to me. And my work gives meaning to my life. That's why I do what I do, and the reason why I've made this course. So that you won't have to try and figure it out all on your own. And that it won't have to take you 30 years to do it. You'll have a head start. And you'll know where to go looking for answers, which are, of course, all inside yourself. So I guess that if you're here doing this bootcamp, those things matter to you. And if they do, then you're my kind of people. Once we start to look into our shadow and discover for ourselves the parts of us that are hiding there, that everyone else can see but us, once we know about these parts that are running our life, they no longer have the same control over us. As I mentioned before, at some point in our life, these disowned parts have saved us. They've protected us and were very useful. We don't want to get rid of them because they're part of us. And all parts are valuable and necessary and have their role to play, or have had their role to play. We have many aspects of the self, the unconscious parts. However, the 7 most common ones that I've discovered through coaching many, many women, and these 7 are ones that all women that I've worked with have got. We all have a critic. We have a judge. We've played the role of the victim. We have a doubter part that doubts everything that we do when we're going to do something. It's like, oh, well, should I not? What if it doesn't work out? They also have a pleaser, a people pleaser, that they're afraid to say what they really want or what they really feel because they want people to like them. And so they think by agreeing with them and trying to make them happy that they'll like them. And that doesn't actually work. All it does is make people treat you like a doormat. And we all have a saboteur when things are going well that jumps on board with the critic, and we sabotage very often the good things that are about to take place in life. And I'm sure you're all aware of the overthinker. We think about things 100 times before we decide are we going to do it or not. And all of these parts are interrelated and they all join forces with each other. So let's look at the critic for a start. The inner critic. Well, we all know that one, don't we? And it has a loud voice. It certainly had in me and in many of my clients. And it's the voice that tells us we're hopeless, we're useless, I'm not good enough, I'm not attractive enough. It's the voice of the I'm not enough. Can you imagine life without the critic? It'd be blissful. The critic does, excuse me, serve a purpose at times, but when it's very loud and negative, we don't need to listen to it. We need to be able to quiet the mind and change that voice from negative to a positive message. One that encourages us and not puts us down at every available opportunity. One that supports us. How different would your life be if you didn't have that voice berating you most of the time? Can you even imagine how you would feel? The different actions you'd take? Well, I promise you that although you cannot stop those messages, you can change them to much more positive ones. And that's essential for your happiness and your peace of mind. And as I said in the last module, when you start to record the things that you're thinking a few times a day, you'll get to notice the messages that you're giving yourself. And once you start to notice, the awareness allows you to change it. So let's move on to the judge. Are we all afraid of being judged? Most people in the world are afraid of that. But oh, to live in a world where there was no judgment. How wonderful would that be? Judgment causes so many problems and so much pain. We do many things and also refrain from doing many things because of judgment, because of fear of it. We judge ourselves very harshly indeed, usually much more so than anybody else would. But we also judge other people. We're afraid to shine, to show our gifts and talents to the world because we're scared of being judged. And certainly in the UK, that's not the way most of us were brought up. We're told not to shine and not to push ourselves and to be humble and to be, not to sing our own praises. That's part of our conditioning. And judgment is part of our society. We all do it. But if we stop doing it, the world would be a very different place. I now make a conscious effort not to judge people. I still slip back, but I try my hardest. And when I catch myself doing it, I stop. It's really not easy because it's such an ingrained habit in our society. But we can stop. And the first person you need to stop judging is yourself, because it does inhibit you on so many levels. Just imagine if you were the only person on the planet. Is there anything you'd be afraid of doing? There'd be no one to judge you. Just stop and think how that feels for a moment. How liberating. Something to contemplate and make a conscious effort to stop yourself each time you go into judgment. I want you to try this for 1 week and see how your perception changes. Just set yourself an intention to not judge anyone or yourself for a week. And when you catch yourself doing it, start again and try it for 7 straight days without doing it. And let me know how you get on. And then another part of us is the victim. We all know about victim mentality, but how many of us refrain from going there? Do you blame others for your misfortune? Do you think that you're just an unfortunate soul and that all these bad things just keep happening to you? That you're just really unlucky? What if I was to tell you that you can change that, and you can change it right now by taking responsibility for your own life? Being a victim isn't a good state to be in, because it puts you on the effect side of the equation and not the cause. And we always want to be on the cause side, because it's from there where we're in power, and it's from there that the magic happens. And we're delving here into one of the universal laws, which I won't go into now, but we'll discuss in a later module. Suffice to say, though, that the causal side of things is where creation happens. The effect side is the result side. And when we're in victim mode, things are happening to us, or so we think. We feel powerless and very much at the mercy of circumstance. Once we flip that around and take responsibility for our actions and our life, believe it or not, everything that happens in life has been created on some level by you. You put yourself in the driver's seat. So you can put yourself in the driver's seat, and you can become the captain of your own ship. And then we have our old friend, the doubter. The doubter and the critic are close cousins. The doubter says, oh, I better not do that. What if I fail? And the critic agrees and says, yes, don't bother. You'd be rubbish anyway. They compound each other consistently. Dealing with your doubter is imperative if you want to move forward with your life. You have to learn self-trust to conquer your doubts about yourself and your abilities. If you don't trust yourself, you're not going to trust anyone else. Self-trust is something that can be developed. It's a muscle. It's there, but it's probably weak because you've probably not used it very much. If the doubt has been wreaking havoc in your life. But you can strengthen it with a bit of determination. And nothing spurs the doubter on more than when you don't keep your word and your agreements with yourself and others. So if you say you're going to do something, do it. Because if you don't, that sets the critic and the doubter off again. Oh, well, you say you're going to do this and then you never do it, and same old thing. And that's how mistrust in yourself is formed. Okay, the next one that I'm sure you're familiar with is the pleaser. And this is another trait that I found in many women, and one that was very, very strong in me. It's the pleaser. And again, it's tied to fear, judgment, rejection, etc. We're afraid that people might not like us or love us if we don't do as they want. So many women lose their identity through this pattern as this becomes a habit. We actually forget who we are, what we want, and what we like. I've worked with many women over the years who don't know what they like and what they want when they first start working with me. They're just not used to thinking about what their own likes and dislikes are, especially if they've been in a partnership with with a husband who's been the dominant character in the relationship, they really don't know what they actually like or want. Some of my clients who've been widowed or divorced haven't got a clue what they like and enjoy. They've been so defined by their partner for so many years and wanted to please them that their own identity is buried. But once you embark on the journey of self-discovery, you discover a whole side of your being that you didn't know before. And one of the first things you must learn how to do is to say no. We so often agree to things that we don't want to do. And each time we do this, we're out of alignment with our true feelings. And your self-esteem will suffer because of it. Saying yes when you mean no is such a habit with so many women. We just do it automatically without even thinking about it. We agree to something, we agree to do something or go somewhere, and then as soon as we've said it, we get that sinking feeling in the pit of our stomach and think, oh no, I really don't want to do that. But then we talk ourselves into it. Oh, well, I should really, and you know, I might really enjoy it, and what if I miss out, and on and on and on it goes. So start to learn to say no. You don't have to even give a reason. In fact, you shouldn't give a reason. When you're more confident with saying no, you won't give a reason, or you can just say, it's really not for me at the moment and it's just not convenient right now. But initially, just instead of agreeing to things that you think you might not want to do, just say, let me get back to you on that. And then think about it and think, do I actually want to do this? And notice the feeling in your body. Your body will tell you whether you want to do something or not. And if you get that sinking feeling in your stomach that I've had so many times, you'll know that you don't want to do it. So take your courage in both of your hands and get back to the person and say, thank you, but I don't want, or I can't make it, or whatever you want to say. Just say no. The doubter and the critic have a field day with each other. We start discussing all the reasons why you should do whatever it is you've agreed to, and the awful consequences of what might happen if you don't. But what I would recommend is that you remove the word should from your vocabulary immediately, because it indicates that you're wrong or you're going to be wrong. And as I've just said, learning to say no instead of yes is so liberating, and it feels really scary. But if you exercise that muscle, like many others that are so weak, you've forgotten it's there. If you start to exercise it, it will become stronger. And it will get easier and easier for you to say no and be honest about your feelings. And when you do that, your self-worth rises immensely. A lady that I was talking to quite some years ago was a Native American shaman. And she was telling me that when we agree to something, we really need to listen to our feelings and feel the feelings in our body. And if we have any inkling at all that it's a no, that something we may not want to do, that it's possibly a no, then really it's a definite no. And that we should honour that and not allow ourselves to either be talked into things from someone else or to talk ourselves into it, which is usually the case. We know it instinctually, but once the mind chatter starts and the critic and the doubter and the pleaser all jump in, we're completely overruled by them. We worry about the consequences of saying no and we give in, but don't. Hold your ground. You'll be glad you did. One of my mentors said many, many years ago, I'm an old man and I've had many worries, most of which have never happened. So I urge you to start trusting that inner knowing inside of you, because it knows better than anyone else the right thing for you. Start to practice exercising the muscle of saying no. It really does get easier and easier. And this is how you will start to form new habits, new, much healthier habits. And the saboteur, yes, I'm sure you've met that one before. Certainly if you're attracted to this kind of work. So many of us engage in subconscious self-sabotage. We sabotage our success and our happiness. The bottom line is this has to do with your self-worth. It has to do with the value you put on yourself and the beliefs that you hold about yourself, your life and your capabilities. And I can promise you that you'll never be happier than you believe you deserve to be, or more successful than you think you're capable of being. So if you're not happy right now, what beliefs are you harboring? Because those beliefs will cause the saboteur to jump in when things are going really well and ruin everything for you. These ideas are just thoughts that you've had, that you've been told, or you've deduced from past experiences. They're just plain old limiting beliefs about yourself and about the world around you. And they're formed very early in life, as we discussed earlier. And then our wounds keep repeating themselves as we grow and evolve. We look for evidence of the things that we believe. Those beliefs created from the wound are building a belief system around the fragmented parts of you, but not your whole self. And this is a distorted and limited view. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. You'll hear me say that many times. And as such, we're limitless. Anything that is humanly possible is within your grasp. Yes, we all excel in some fields more than others, but we limit ourselves so much due to our belief system. And that belief system was designed through a lens that has a distorted picture of who you really are. A picture that was formed when you were very, very tiny. So if things start to go your way and then something happens and it all ends in tears, know that your saboteur has played a part in this. If you don't believe you're worthy of a great job or a fantastic relationship, of optimal health, perfect weight, whatever it is, if you don't believe that you deserve it, you'll subconsciously sabotage it yourself somewhere along the way. Because what you believe will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It has to happen in line with universal law. We'll inadvertently do something to cause this thing to fail. That is all down to self-sabotaging patterns of behaviour, because we just cannot believe that such good fortune or happiness can be ours. And again, we can change this, because once we become aware of the traits and the unconscious behaviours, they no longer have the same level of power over us. We're aware of them. We know what's happening. We recognise them. And then we can begin to put measures and practices in place to counteract them. And let's go to the overthinker. So many of my clients struggle with this one again. The overthinker is closely related to the doubter and the pleaser. In fact, all of the hidden patterns support and encourage each other in the quest to keep you stuck. And the underlying reason for that is they want to keep you safe. You know what it's like. Something's happened. It can be such a trivial thing to begin with, and you think it over and over, and then you think about it some more, and eventually the whole thing has become magnified, and you're imagining the worst possible circumstances of whatever situation is causing you to feel anxious. It may be something like your boyfriend's not called when he's away on business or something like that. Before you know it, the doubter, the critic, set to work to provide you with perfectly formed pictures in your mind of the worst possible outcomes. You start to feel distraught. You're having palpitations. You visualize him with some stunning beauty. And you're ready to call time on the relationship, when in fact, he may just have had a busy day and not had a minute in between meetings to call you. So can you see that you've created this picture in your mind, and you've caused the feelings in your body that you're feeling because of your overthinking of that situation, joining forces with your doubter and your critic? An uncontrolled mind is such a demon in our lives. This is the hell, and this is what we do to ourselves on a daily and ongoing basis. None of these subconscious patterns want to harm you. They really want to protect you and save you from hurt and disappointment, or embarrassment and humiliation, as they once did. But you don't need them anymore. You're a grown-up now. It's time to let them go. They really are there to keep you safe, and as I've already mentioned, at some point in your life, they've served you well. But now you need to realise that they're inhibiting you from reaching your dreams and your goals. You can't stop your thoughts from coming, but you can change them. You create your state of being by the thoughts you're consistently thinking. You go from thinking to doing to being. The words we say to ourselves and the pictures we form in our mind create our life. It's that simple. So you must have a clear vision of what you want and set your intention to get it. And so what I'd like you to do is, I think I don't know how to get the PowerPoint back on, oh dear. Anyway, what I'd like you to do is to take out a piece of paper and really sit down and think about your intentions for the next year. What are they? What do you really, really want? What do you really want to achieve? Write down at least 10 things that you really, really want to achieve in the next year. And put feeling into it. Really feel that this is what you really, really want deep inside. And then I want you to type that list up and keep it by your bed and read it every single night before you go to sleep, last thing, and first thing in the morning when you wake. Because what we think about last thing at night actually replays in our mind over and over again whilst we sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, when you're in that sort of drowsy, semi-conscious state, your brain waves are slower. They're what's known as being in the alpha state, and that's when it's much easier to create beliefs in the subconscious mind. And this is what the aim of this is. We're trying to reprogram your subconscious mind. So I want you to write those 10 things out, type them up, and read them every day. And that is the end of module 2. So I hope that's been useful for you, and it's probably, you know, if you've not heard anything about the shadow before, it's probably sounds really quite weird, but believe me, it's all absolutely true. And when you start to notice that these other parts are actually taking charge in your life, you'll recognize them. And at that point, that's when you can do something about them. To thank them and say, thank you, I don't need you right now. If it's the inner child or the critic, they can just step aside and let that part of your soul, the part that's whole and complete, take charge. So thank you for joining me for this module, and I'll see you in module 3.